Steve McQueen was not the kind of man people imagine talking about beauty in sentimental language. He was too stripped down for that, too hard-edged, too self-contained, before the legend fully settled around him, before the racing mythology and the title of the King of Cool became inseparable from his name. McQueen was simply a man with a ruthless eye for what stood out. And when it came to women, what stopped him was never the mass-produced version of glamour Hollywood could turn out on demand. It was something more exact than that. Something instantly visible but difficult to fake. The women who left the deepest impression on him were not just attractive, they were distinct, a certain face, a certain stillness, a way of standing in front of a camera and making everyone else look less complete. Some had cool elegance, some had raw sensuality, some had intelligence written straight into their features, some had beauty that looked almost too natural for the screen, and others had the kind that seemed sharpened by it. What made them unforgettable in McQueen's eyes was not youth alone, and not just symmetry. It was force, the quality that separates pretty women from women the camera could never fully explain. That is what makes this list so interesting, because once you really look at the women who seem to fit Steve McQueen's visual taste, a pattern starts to emerge. He was not drawn only to softness, and he was not drawn only to obvious bombshell glamour. He seemed to notice women whose beauty held up under close-up, under silence, under time. Women whose faces became more interesting the longer you looked. Women who did not just photograph well, but carried something in the eyes, the posture, the mouth, the way they turned their heads, that made them feel impossible to confuse with anyone else. Today we are looking at the 7 women who best fit that standard. The 7 women who, in one way or another, represented the kind of beauty Steve McQueen never forgot. And while some of these names will feel inevitable, one of the highest placements is far less obvious than people might expect. In fact, the woman at number 2 may be the most revealing choice on the entire list because her beauty does not fit the obvious Steve McQueen fantasy at all, which is exactly why her placement says so much. Number 7. Faye Dunaway. Faye Dunaway had the kind of face the camera could sharpen into a weapon. High cheekbones, cool eyes, a long, elegant neck, and a controlled mouth that rarely looked fully relaxed. She did not have a warm beauty. She had a disciplined one, the kind that looked tailored rather than soft, as if every angle in her face had been arranged for maximum impact. Even in still photographs, Dunaway could look expensive, severe, and faintly dangerous. She was not the sort of woman who invited you in. She made you study her from a distance. That visual quality became impossible to ignore in Bonnie and Clyde. On paper the role could have leaned on simple glamour, but Dunaway gave it much more than that. In close-up, her face always looked alert. Her eyes did not drift lazily through scenes. They watched, measured, calculated. She had the rare ability to look beautiful and strategic at the same time, which is one reason she felt so modern compared to many of the softer stars who came before her. She was not decorative. She looked like she had plans. That is the kind of thing McQueen would have noticed immediately. He was not a man who needed obvious prettiness. Explain to him. He liked tension. He liked women who looked as though they had an internal life the camera could not entirely domesticate. Dunaway's beauty was not built around sweetness or emotional accessibility. It was built around structure, bone structure, posture, reserve, and the feeling that she was always slightly harder than the room expected her to be. That made her beauty feel less like a gift and more like a form of control. And if Faye Dunaway represented beauty as precision, the next woman brought something outwardly softer, but emotionally far more exposed. Number 6, Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood's beauty lived in her eyes first. Large, dark, expressive eyes that always seemed to be carrying more feeling than the dialogue required. Her face was delicate, almost fragile at times, with soft features, smooth skin, and a warmth that made her instantly readable on screen. But the longer you looked at Natalie Wood, the less simple that softness became. There was tension in it, a sadness, a tremor of vulnerability that gave her beauty weight. That is part of what made her so memorable in films like Splendor in the Grass and West Side Story. She was not just lovely in the standard studio sense, she was emotionally visible. Her face changed with feeling in a way many actresses tried to hide. When she looked hurt, the hurt seemed to pass directly through the screen. When she looked hopeful, it felt temporary. When she looked in love, there was often fear mixed into it. That made her beauty feel alive rather than fixed. It moved, it reacted, it let the audience see too much. For a man like McQueen, that would have mattered. He built so much of his own screen power on what he could suggest without speech. Natalie Wood had a similar gift from the opposite direction. Her beauty was inseparable from how much feeling she allowed to remain visible in the face. She was not a mask. She was a surface under pressure. The eyes, especially, did most of the work. They gave her a beauty that looked human rather than sculpted, intimate rather than distant. That is why she lasted in memory. Not because she was the most formally perfect woman of her era, but because she never seemed emotionally sealed off. And while Natalie Wood's beauty depended on openness, the next woman on this list had almost the opposite effect. She did not open the frame. She took possession of it. Number 5, Ursula Andress. Ursula Andress did not gradually become beautiful. She arrived fully formed, blonde, athletic, broad-shouldered in the most elegant way, with a cleanly sculpted face and a physical confidence that made fragility seem irrelevant. Her beauty was not delicate, it was immediate. She looked like a physical fact, the kind of woman whose effect on the screen registered before the audience had even processed why. That is exactly what made her breakthrough image so unforgettable. When she emerged in Dr. No, she was not just another glamorous blonde. She looked commanding. The body was part of the impact, obviously, but it was not the whole story. The real force came from the way she carried it. Upright posture, direct gaze, no visible self-consciousness. She did not move like a woman hoping to be admired. She moved like a woman who already understood the effect she was having and saw no reason to soften it. That is the part McQueen would have respected. He understood screen force better than almost anyone. He knew the difference between beauty that simply photographs well and beauty that changes the energy of a scene. Ursula Andress had the second kind. She was not trying to be charming. She was not trying to appear vulnerable. She looked strong, assured, and slightly beyond negotiation. That made her beauty feel physical in the deepest sense, not just attractive to look at, but impossible to ignore. Many women of that era were sold as fantasies. Ursula looked more like an event. Her beauty did not ask to be interpreted. It announced itself. And if Ursula Andress represented beauty as impact, the next woman offered something much colder, quieter, and in some ways more difficult to explain. Number 4, Catherine Deneuve. Catherine Deneuve looked almost too composed to belong to ordinary life. Pale, blonde hair, smooth skin, cool eyes, and a face so balanced it could seem unnerving. There was nothing cluttered about her beauty. No excess movement, no unnecessary expression, no feeling of visual noise. She had the kind of symmetry that made other actresses look busier than they were. Even when she was doing very little, the camera seemed to settle around her. That was part of her power in films like Belle de Jour. Deneuve did not rely on overt heat. She relied on control, the stillness of the face, the unreadable gaze, the impression that some interior door remained closed, no matter how closely you watched. Her beauty did not feel emotional in the obvious sense. It felt sealed, protected. That made it more provocative. not less. Audiences kept staring because they were trying to see past the composure and never quite could. A man like McQueen would have understood the appeal of that immediately. His own screen image depended on withholding. He knew how powerful it was to reveal less than expected. Catherine Deneuve operated with a similar discipline. She did not plead for attention. She reduced movement, reduced expression, and somehow made herself larger by doing less. That is a rare skill. It turns beauty into atmosphere. What separated her from other great beauties was the absence of visible effort. Some women looked glamorous because the machinery of cinema dressed them into it. Deneuve looked as though glamour had reached its final, coldest form in her face. The effect was elegant, distant, and impossibly clean. And while Deneuve made beauty feel untouchable, the next woman made it personal. Number 3, Ali McGraw. Ali McGraw is where the list stops being abstract. Because with her, beauty was not just something Steve McQueen could notice from a distance. It entered his life and changed it. That alone makes her impossible to leave out. But beyond the personal history, what made McGraw so striking was how modern she looked. Her beauty did not feel manufactured by the old studio system. It felt leaner than that, smarter, more natural. She had strong brows, large eyes, a narrow face, beautiful bone structure, and a look that suggested intelligence before glamour. There was nothing overworked about her. No heavy theatrical styling was required. She had that early 1970s visual quality that made many older forms of movie star beauty feel suddenly overdressed. The face was direct, the gaze was clear. The effect was clean, personal, and immediate. That is why she felt so convincing in Love Story, and why she remained visually interesting even outside traditional glamour roles. McGraw did not need ornamental excess. Her attractiveness came from proportion, expression, and the sense that she was entirely comfortable being seen without too much interference. That kind of natural glamour is harder to create than the more obvious forms. It depends on the face itself holding attention. For McQueen, that would have carried special force. He was not likely to be held by women who looked purely assembled. Ali McGraw looked alive in a less artificial way. Her beauty felt close enough to touch, but distinct enough to matter. Not icy, not overpowering, not theatrical, just completely convincing. And in his case, convincing was enough to rearrange an entire life. That brings us to the most surprising placement on the list, because the woman at number 2 does not fit the obvious McQueen pattern. She reveals something more unusual in his taste. Number 2, Sharon Tate. Sharon Tate may be the most surprising woman this high on the list, because at first glance she does not seem like the obvious Steve McQueen choice. She was not hard-edged like Dunaway, not commanding in the Ursula Andress sense, not emotionally armoured like Deneuve. Her beauty was lighter than that, softer, more radiant, more open, and that is exactly what makes her placement so revealing. Sharon Tate had one of those faces that seemed to catch light without fighting for it. Soft blonde hair, bright open eyes, full lips, smooth skin, and a natural photogenic ease that made beauty look almost accidental. Some women appear to have been styled into glamour. Tate looked as though glamour simply kept happening around her. Her face was gentle in its construction, but never blank. There was warmth in it, ease, a kind of brightness that made even posed photographs feel relaxed. That is what made her different. Her beauty did not look sharpened into self-defense. It looked unforced. She seemed open without seeming weak, glamorous without looking overly aware of it, sexy without ever appearing to push the point too hard. That combination is rare. It creates the illusion that beauty is just radiating off the person rather than being carefully arranged for public consumption. And that may be precisely why she would have stayed in McQueen's mind. Because Sharon Tate suggests that his eye was not limited to women who projected steel, He also responded to women whose beauty came with softness, ease, and visible lightness. But even then, there was nothing flimsy about her effect. The face lingered because it looked so natural under scrutiny. The more you looked, the more complete it seemed. Not colder, not more intimidating, just more beautiful. That is what makes her placement so telling. She is the least obvious fit, and maybe the most revealing one, because it shows that McQueen's taste was not only about danger, it was also about women whose beauty looked effortless enough to disarm him. And yet, even Sharon Tate could not take the top spot, because one woman combined elegance, sensuality, refinement, and visual balance in a way that feels closest to McQueen's full pattern. Number 1. Jacqueline Bisset. Jacqueline Bisset takes the top spot because she combines almost everything Steve McQueen seemed likely to admire in women. She had elegance, but never stiffness, sensuality, but never vulgarity, intelligence, but never coldness. Her beauty did not depend on one single feature, though the eyes were the first thing most people noticed. Large, luminous, thoughtful eyes that made the face feel emotionally intelligent before she even spoke. But it was the combination that made her so formidable. Bisset had refined bone structure, a beautifully balanced face, a full mouth, and that rare ability to look aristocratic and sensual at the same time. Some women fall firmly into one category or the other. Bisset did not. She could seem polished from one angle and deeply intimate from another. The face had softness in it, but not passivity. The posture was graceful, but never brittle. She carried herself like someone who understood exactly how much the camera liked her and did not need to overplay it. That is what pushed her above the others. Jacqueline Bisset was not one note. She did not offer just heat, or just coolness, or just emotional transparency, or just command. She could move between those qualities. That made her beauty more durable. The longer you looked, the more it seemed to contain. Not confusion, range, variety within control. A face that stayed interesting because it never flattened into one simple idea. For McQueen, that would have been the perfect combination. He did not seem drawn to women who could be explained in a sentence. He liked edge, but not only edge. He liked beauty, but not beauty without character. He liked presence, but not the kind that depended on too much effort. Jacqueline Bisset offered all of that at once. She looked complete from the first glance, and more complex with every glance after that. That is the hardest kind of beauty to beat, and that is why she belongs at number 1. Not because she was the loudest beauty on the list, or the most famous sex symbol, or the most instantly obvious choice, but because she seems to unite the things McQueen's eye would have valued most: balance, force, elegance, visual intelligence. A face that held under close-up, and a presence that never needed noise to register. In the end, what this list reveals is that Steve McQueen's taste was more exact than people might assume. He was not simply drawn to bombshells, and he was not simply drawn to polished elegance. He seemed drawn to women whose beauty felt complete from the outside, but kept offering more once you looked closer. Faye Dunaway had the bay, severity. Natalie Wood had the emotional visibility. Ursula Andress had the physical impact. Catherine Deneuve had the restraint. Ali McGraw had the modern naturalism. Sharon Tate had the effortless radiance. And Jacqueline Bisset had the rarest quality of all. She looked as though she belonged to more than one category at once. For a man like McQueen, that may have been the true test. Not whether a woman was merely beautiful, but whether her beauty held under time, under silence, under scrutiny. Whether the face stayed interesting after the first impression wore off. Whether the camera kept finding new reasons to come back to her, and these 7 did. Thank you for watching.